Hello there, friends. Welcome back to the Vaults Remastered. Today, we're talking about how to take your game and make it more meaty for your players. You want to sink their teeth right into it and chomp, 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 nom, 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 right? We're talking about strategies of how to do that, how to make your players more engaged in your game. So, this could be the first of a series of 10 videos I'm planning because I want to do one per strategy because we're talking about 10 strategies to help you get your players using their player character backstories and weaving them, intertwining them, wrapping them up in your plot so that they can't let go and they're just going to keep on following you to the bitter end. Here we go. So, we're going to first introduce, of course, what are these 10 strategies? I'm not going to detail each one, but I am going to give you the list in case you're like, hey, I just want to know what these 10 things are and I don't care about anything else. But after that, I'm going to go into number one in deep detail today. And then I'm going to do 9 more videos where I go into each of the other ones in turn. So without further ado, let's go down the list. We've got ourselves number 1, personal stakes in the main quest. So we're going to talk about that today. That's what the main topic of this video is going to be. Number 2, second strategy is utilizing NPCs from the characters' backstories. Third strategy we're going to get into a third video later on is going to be incorporating personal locations into your campaign. Fourth, we're going to align your character's goals with the plot's objectives. Number 5, we're going to be revealing secrets tied to your characters. The sixth strategy we're going to get into is character-specific quests that will advance the plot. Seventh strategy we'll talk about evolving character arcs through the plot's developments. Number 8, thematic resonance between backstories from the character and the main plot of the game. Number 9, callback, holla to the characters' histories in plot twists, using plot twists to do this. And the 10th video we're going to get into, the 10th strategy is leveraging backstory elements with not climatic, but climactic events in your game world. Climate is something else. Anyway, let's look at number 1. So the rest of this video is going to be deep diving into the first strategy, weaving personal stakes with the main quest. So we're going to do this. We're going to take a strategic approach to make the story more engaging and meaningful for players. That sounds great, right? How do you do it? That's what this first strategy is going to get into. So the method is this. We're going to integrate a character's personal narrative into the main plot to increase their investment, right? If they are, buying into what you're selling, they're going to want to chase your plot, like I said, to the end. What are we doing? How do we do this? We're going to get into some more details. So, what does this mean? We're going to use pivotal events or elements from their backstory to create personal stakes within the main quest of the game. So that main arc that's going through your story, we want to use stuff from your characters, their backstory, to create a personal stake in that main quest to make sure it sees itself to the end. They are driving it. This is going to make that overarching conflict more relevant to your player characters on individual levels, and it's going to motivate them to engage with the story very deeply. They're going to want to see the end of it. Okay, they're not just along for the ride, they're behind the wheel. All right, what does this mean? How do we apply this? So let's get into this even more. Direct engagement. By incorporating personal stakes that we're talking about into the main quest, we're going to transform your campaign, which is normally, possibly horribly, just a series of tasks, right? Well, we got to do this week, and next session we're going to do that, and the session after that we're going to do this, and they're just going down through the motions to get to the end. You see this a lot in published stories. I think this is where homebrew really can shine because you can weave the story around your player characters and what they want to do. So anyway, you're going to transform this campaign from this series of tasks to deep personal journeys for each of the players. This is not obviously as easy as it sounds. You need to know your player characters in order to weave them into your game, into your plot. So this requires not just you to do a lot of research and thinking, but your player characters need to give you, well, the players need to give you a lot of information about their player characters. And you need to keep an ear out for what they're talking about so that you can make note and use it later. You got to remember this: PCs are not just going to be observers of the action in the game, but they're actively participating. I've used this word a lot in some of my recent videos about active this and active that. Well, this applies here as well, where we're talking about engagement, intertwining. We need the players to be active participants. If they're just sitting there watching, they're not going to have fun. You're not going to have fun. And a lot of times the game's not going to go anywhere. So we want to get them to sink their teeth in and go with it. So we want them to participate because their narrative is going to help influence your campaign's direction. Emotional investment. If you can link your characters' backstories to the main narrative, to the plot, the stakes are much higher for them. And the emotional payoff when they get to the end, whether it's successful or failure, is going to be way more impactful if they are actually personally at stake here. So your players will be encouraged to invest more both in their characters and their story. If they know, like I tell my players this all the time, a lot of the stuff in the game doesn't exist until they ask the question, until they make a character that, needs to know something. Like they have a new cleric who wants to worship some deity. I'll create that deity for that character and then the lore that goes with it. So knowing them knowing that they're able to create things through you, through what their character's doing, that really gets them invested in your game. The last thing here about how we can apply this or what it all means is that we can use this technique for any sort of story you want to tell. We can apply it to a fantasy world, let's say, that's threatened by an ancient god. You could use this having your players' direct personal stories involved in that. Check, of course. You're running some sort of sci-fi space opera. There's an imprisoned princess who knows the enemy's war plans. Check, you can use this strategy for that. You're running some 1920s investigation. The crazed cult is trying to awaken some cosmic horror. Check, you can use this strategy for that. Having your PC's personal stakes woven into your main plot, it cuts across any genre game that you're running. How do we do this though? Practical implementation. What's some strategies here? Incorporation techniques. This, of course, is something you're going to have to bring out in session 0, right? Because you need the players to not necessarily buy in, but to give you the fuel that you can then burn through the story. So during session 0, you want to explore this idea. You want to be able to help the players define what matters to their characters, what makes them tick. You want to introduce your plot. Hey, here's what the game is all about. But make sure they understand that the plot elements are going to be challenging. They're going to be threatening those personal parts of their story. So you're having this nice back and forth as you're developing the game during that initial session 0, as you're developing the party, as you're developing the characters themselves. Balancing your group dynamics, this is something else you got to be thoughtful of if you're going to use this strategy, is that, I'm saying, hey, let's focus on, player characters' personal stakes and their personal stories, but you need to balance that with the main story itself and the group's cohesiveness, the group's dynamics, because nobody wants to play in a game where 90% of the spotlight is on a single character. This isn't Lord of the Rings and we're all following Frodo, right? We need to know what are each of your 4, 5, 6, PCs in your game, however many people are in your game, what's up with each of their characters. This is also why it's very important for players to be actively participating in the process, because they need to give you the information that you can use. And I find myself, weekly or each session trying to find out from my player characters, hey, what are their goals? What's the one thing they want to do next session? And keeping that pulse, checking in on them to make sure, is there anything I need to know that I can then use? And I want my player characters to give me more information. I want them to give me backstories. I want them to give me more, developmental information. So, even though we're going to spotlight those things, we still have to keep in mind, though, the overarching story itself, because we want to make sure that that individual spotlight, that individual story is tying back in. It's woven back into the main arc, so that as that arc is moving, the player character story is moving. They may be driving a part of that arc, but they are not the only driver. You got 3, 4, 5 other players that you also are trying to share this narrative with. And the last thing you want to think about if you're going to implement this is, how does this affect your role play? If you are able to focus on these personal stakes, your characters are going to be more likely to be making decisions based on their backgrounds, based on their motivations, all those things, especially in Pathfinder, that are really important for character creation in the first place. All that stuff is going to be important in the whole decision making process, the whole role playing stuff, because their characters are tied into your game much more tightly than if it was just following the breadcrumbs type of thing. So it gives this much more nuanced interactions, because now they're making decisions not because, oh, that's what the plot says next, but it's because what their character literally would do or would want to do. And it helps them develop their character over time as well. Now, I've been talking about this. How do I get all this information? How do I make this a personalized, game for my players? I use a questionnaire that I give my players, and I'm not going to read through all 18 of these, but long story short, at the start of my campaign, I posted up this set of questions for my players, and I said, hey, as you're creating your character, session 0 going into session 1, think about these questions and give me whatever answer information you can. Because the more you give me, the more I can use to build the world and make it more real for your character. And I had a few of my players did just that. They went through and they gave me lots of answers, 6 pages, more pages of stuff, of a whole story about their character, and answered all these questions. Some other players only gave me a few answers. It makes it harder to weave them into this grander picture, but all I'm doing with them is I'm trying to pay more close attention as each session goes, because maybe initially they didn't have a great concept to create and answer all these questions for their character yet. But as they're starting to play the character and interact with the game system and the world more, these answers are now starting to come more naturally to them. So I use the answers to these questions for each of my player characters. So as I start to plan out the campaign, as I plan out a session, I have this as reference materials that I can spotlight on and make sure that how to ask the question, how does this information tie into my main story and drive things forward? Or how, if the story is moving in a certain direction, how can I throw out a line in order to pull a character in using one of these answers that they gave me. Now, a real game example I'll give you is from one of my player characters. And in the box text up here, these are his answers he gave me for his character. And he said the weaknesses of his character, whose name was Welverin Filium, who this is his Talespire, Hero Forge created mini, which we then import into our Talespire game. And he told me that his weaknesses were his sister. What can I do with this information? That is the main thing that I'm going to talk about here in my real world example. This character, Welverin, has a sister that's a weakness. He's playing one of the Spite Spawn, and the Spite Spawner is a offshoot of Tiefling, who, in the game world, they are very hateful of others. They are misery loves company. They are the perfect definition of your frenemy, that type of thing. But he has a weakness. He has a soft spot in his heart for his sister. Okay, so I turn the screws on that, because what's a good GM to do other than take character information, this beautiful, weakness, and turn it into game time fodder. So in my game, Welverin's sister gets kidnapped. This was like the cliffhanger from one of my sessions, that she gets snatched along with several other children by some insane construct follower of this arcano intelligence named Nexus. And if you want to know more information about that, you got to like and subscribe and all that fun stuff, because I've talked about this a few times in some of my other videos. So you can go back and look at some of those playlists. Talked about it in my initial, how to turn your world from 5e to second edition Pathfinder. I also talked about it in some of my actionable series. But anyway, this construct, this Nexus thrall, this assimilant, kidnaps several children from the settlement that the player characters are currently staying at, and the sister's one of them. She's, I think, 10, 12 years old, something like that. Snatches her. Now he's got his teeth sunk into the plot, right? And I didn't just do this for the hell of it, right? Oh, I was going to kidnap a sister. this AI, this construct, this whole, what's going down with the assimilants and stuff is a major, major component of the whole plot. It is one of the driving forces in the game world, which is based upon the theme of chaos versus order. And this entity and what its minions are doing represents one side of that equation. And so following that lead, following this kidnapped sister named Hope, is following the main story as well. Now, Welverin and the player may not know that, but as they go through the pursuit and the subsequent, finding of the sister and freeing her, they come to realize with a bunch of clues that I've dropped. See my actionable clues video I just put out a few days ago. They learn some of the truth about this big bad evil guy, or AI in this case. So, real world example, real game example is this. Welverin's personal journey begins with this quest to find the sister Hope, who's a victim of Nexus's activities. And this establishes immediate personal stakes for Welverin. It takes his participation in the campaign from just, oh, I'm just an adventurer, I'm just level 1, I'm just joining this caravan as a guard, and we're escorting refugees through the under earth, blah blah yada yada, boring, right? Now he's got some real stakes in the game. He's got skin in the game, as we would say. Emotional arc. The story intensifies as Welverin and the party, they discover that rescuing Hope, that's not the end of the story, the end of their challenge. Despite they finding her, they're now confronted by the fact that she's been assimilated with these nanites, these little micro clockwork machines that are inside of her and are manipulating her and making her, a thrall to this queen type of, Borg queen sort of concept, this Nexus. And this now is going to test Welverin's resolve, because do you just say, if you go back to his character, who is very, I don't care about other people. Now all of a sudden he's put into a situation of, oh man, my sister is not just my kidnapped. Now I got her. Now she's infected with these things. What do I do? Do I try to get help from these other player characters to save her? Do I just leave? I mean, what am I going to do now? So now I'm taking him, I'm taking the player, and I'm pushing his buttons, right? I'm like, oh, you want to tell me that your weakness is your sister? You want to tell me that you don't like other people? Well, let's play with that, right? Let's have fun with it. Okay? That's what you do as a GM. You start to put the screws to the players and make them start to make decisions based upon what they say their characters' hopes and dreams are, or what their likes and dislikes are. So that's where that questionnaire was very useful information for me. So I put him into this situation. What's he going to do? This is now driving action, and it's driving the plot. They're now engaged with it because now they need to figure out what's up with this assimilation process. What's up with this Nexus? Who is the Nexus? Where is it? How do you stop it? This is the big bad evil guy, right? This is what I want the characters to go after. And now this player and this character has a reason to go after it. Continuing with this example, when all hope is lost. So here's something else that he gave me from his questionnaire. One of his major emotional turning points, engagement, touch points in his life was his sister's birth. Prior to that, this character Welverin was just a miserable SOB. He didn't care about anything. But when his sister was born, it's now all of a sudden awakened a new emotion in him. Because Spitespawn, for the most part, don't have emotion. They have like fake emotions. But suddenly he had this concept of love awakened with him and protection. And he suddenly started to value his own self, his own self-worth, enough that he kind of ran away from his existence, although it wasn't very pleasant anyway. But he took the sister with him, and now has kind of become sort of this vagabond lifestyle, which ultimately led him to join the party and join as an adventurer. And his sister's with him amongst these refugees. But now he gave me this fodder, right? So now I'm like, let me take that away from you and see what you do with it, right? So again, playing the evil GM here, but that's your job. You're trying to get your players to get engaged with the story. So now I've done this. So this is going to lead into this. The climactic decision making is going to have to start happening here. So now the story is starting to get to this climax where in order to protect Gemheart, the settlement where the player characters are, and the threats posed by this assimilation process, not just this Nexus and its followers, but now Hope is one of them. She is a danger. The player and the characters, the rest of them, they can't just like take her back to the settlement and let her loose. No. So what they decided to do is they fossilized her. They locked her away in stone. Think about like Han Solo Carbonite sort of a situation. And even though this was a heart wrenching action that he had to agree with and do, this was the predicament they're in. This is the consequences of what happened, the threat that this Nexus is posing. And now his characters had to make a personal sacrifice. Like, I need to sacrifice my sister as a stone, as a fossil now, until I can figure out a way to undo what's happened to her. He's got personal stakes in the game, and it leads into the group dynamics beautifully. So his personal quest is enriching the campaign. There's a heavy toll that this Nexus's actions are going to take on people, not just random mysterious NPCs or some faceless peasant or something like that. This is happening to one of the player characters now. Okay, so it's going to also help to serve as a unifying cause for the party, right? Now the whole party's like, hey, not only is this Nexus bad news, but the Nexus is affecting one of my comrades' sisters. We need to do something. We need to take action. Otherwise, even more people are going to get assimilated. What can we do to stop it? So it gives that shared experience, and it's fostering a bond between the characters now, between the party members. They have to work collectively. They have to confront this challenge. They have to work together through any grief and loss. Otherwise, hope is going to be lost. It's going to be gone. All right. That's going to wrap up our vid today. So hopefully what you have taken away from this, if you're a game master out there like me, using these personal stakes as a tool, as a strategy, it should help you enrich your storytelling. It should allow you to make the game, make the story have a personal narrative that each player is going to be able to share, that you're going to be able to put a spotlight on. You're going to be able to delve into your background stories that your players are writing for you. Because if they're writing and they're giving you, a couple pages, even a paragraph of backstory, you should use it, right? They wrote it for you. Use it. So delve into that thing. What details can you get out of there? And then don't just, oh, I'll throw them in here and there. Those details drive your story. Your story, and this is hard for some GMs to grasp, it's not your story. Okay? The game is your player's story. You're just telling it. Okay? They are the characters, right? You don't go to the movies to see the movie. You go to see the characters and what they're doing, right? There's not a movie, there's not a novel, there's not a story without the characters. And it's your players' characters that are in the driver's seat. So give them control. Look at their backgrounds, look at their stories, and use it. Okay? Make them react to things that they told you. Oh, you told me this stuff? Well, I put it in there. You got to do something about it now because it's in your story. And last thing here, takeaway, is that if you use this technique, use the strategy, you're able to create these memorable and immersive experiences, right? The player who's playing this Welverin, they're not going to forget what happened to Hope. They're not going to forget that she was like, crying to him during the session where they were defeating the kidnapper. The kidnapper, this construct who stole Hope and injected her with these nanites and converted her to a thrall. Hope is like begging, stop hitting her, stop, stabbing her, stop attacking her. Why? That was an emotional moment, right? It's resonating now with that characters. It was cruel and savage of me, but I did it anyway, okay? Those are your takeaways. If you like the video, if you like this sort of stuff, I plan on 9 more of these bad boys. So tune in, like and subscribe, notify yourself so you know when the next one's coming out. I'll probably put one out every day, every other day, something like that for the next couple weeks. And hopefully you enjoy them. In the meantime, have yourselves a good night and take care.